Ahoy, you salty sailors. Time to raise anchor and set sail for your best scrawny life. Arrgh. In this episode, we are going to create 3 cartoons. So focusing on the first column here on our job sheet, this is going to be a face-on vector, one color, comic book style, and we're going to have 2 files at the end. One will be black for reproduction over a light background, and the other will be white for reproduction over a dark background. This is Josh from the YouTube channel Mythical Kitchen. I've just snapped a reference photo using my phone, and then I'm freehanding the drawing from that as a reference. If we were doing this for an actual client, we would import a reference photo that they had provided and trace from that. It's the only way to get that exact likeness. So we got the eyes looking right, then we're going to snap on the symmetry. Since this is a face-on image, that will cut our drawing time in half. Then we're going to snap off the symmetry once we've got the face drawn. So we will begin by creating a contone grayscale sketch, then convert that to a bitmap, and then in Adobe Illustrator we will reinterpret that bitmap using our final line style into a vector file. So the client can use it for logos, merchandise, all the way up to signs of all kinds of sizes. Put in a little hair, which is asymmetrical. Flip it around a couple of times. Looks decent. I think we'll shrink the width just a hair there. That looks better. So our light source will be, the main light is going to be on our left and a little bit in front, and then we'll have a rim light on the right that is perpendicular. And we're going to go ahead and shade this with just a low opacity round soft brush. Turn that blue, and that becomes our sketch layer. And so, because of course this image is going to be one color only, it's not a contone or a continuous tone image. We're going to build our one color image on top of that. Then we will import this layer into Illustrator and build the vector based illustration on top of that. The reason for doing that is, in this case, our pretend client will be able to resize the image to any size they want, and it will still have sharp, clean, non-pixelated edges. Now in this case we're just using we're rendering the shading with the various thicknesses of these lines. So our final output from Illustrator will be a one color vector image. In other words, it's either on or off. It's either 1 or 0. It's either black or white. And the reason for doing this is it makes it much more versatile in how the image can be applied to various substrates. Let's say, for instance, in this case, it's going to be used as an illustration that's printed onto a t-shirt. This image can be reproduced with fast, high quality, very durable, cheaper screen printing, as opposed to a slower, lower volume, less durable, less quality in product digital printing for like a 4-color process type image. And here we've opened the image in Illustrator, and the auto trace looked fairly good, but like I said, I'm going to change the style a little bit actually. So we're going to completely trace it by hand, and there at the end of that is what I had. Vector images can be a little bit tricky, so I built this with no compound paths. If the screen printer is using a device that can't read a native Illustrator file, and you or they are converting it to EPS, that's an opportunity for those compound paths to fail to knock out. So it jumps from a one color to a two color job. And here you can see the image works as long as the background is lighter than the illustration. But if we just inverted it, you can see it doesn't work against a dark background. But it's not that hard to close up some of the areas and just switch it instead of a black image, now the image is white. So that will look correct on a darker background. So here's our final output, and I didn't, I thought that I had too many details there, so I made another version with fewer lines and made him look a little bit younger, and that actually was a pretty good resemblance. And there's our dark background version. Alright, back to the job sheet. Second column, this is going to be halfway turned away from the viewer. It's a relatively small file. Now when I say it's not resizable, it's generally always resizable down. It looks like the client is looking for something that they can use on a website. When the user rolls a cursor over that image, the image will change. There's an animation that comes along with it. It could invite the user to click on that icon. So when constructing this underlying skull morphology, this jawbone shape generally drops down from the middle of the sphere. But in manga, the implied underlying skeletal skull structure is not human, but feline. It's a human face stretched on a cat skull. So we're bringing our jaw structure up and forward of where it would normally be. Now, I do not draw the manga style. There are plenty of young artists who are already doing a great job with that. I'm shooting for maybe something that's kind of cowboy bebop in appearance, that sort of a style, a little bit older. It's going to, the character is going to have a nose and a mouth that aren't so highly stylized as to be almost unrecognizable. And I actually kind of like this. The eye proportions look a little off, and some things that could be changed, but it's sometimes I have trouble exaggerating, get that cartoonish look in certain portraits, but in this case it just kind of came out of the first try there, and I like it. This is Chef V, again from the YouTube channel Mythical Kitchen, and she has a giant ear to ear smile so it's not actually exaggerated as much as you might think it is. So the sketch layer is down, and we're putting the black layer, our final black layer, on top of that. And you can see that I have varied the line weight of the outline of the face. We will add our second color, that in a separate layer as well. Normally you would want a consistent line style. Some folks have an inconsistent line style, and I experimented around with that, and it wound up looking kind of good. Might play around with that more later on. Although we're calling it technically a two-color image, it is going to be an RGB in the final product. Here we're going to, before we get back to that, we're going to build this white layer here and give that a blur just to light up the face a bit. We'll use the burn tool on some of the shaded areas. So there, yeah, you can see I use different line weights, different line styles, and to do the shading in different areas of the face, and it kind of came out kind of good. I kind of like it. So we're going to have a wink as our rollover animation, and we could add a sound effect, a little chime when it happens as well. We'll get into that later on some other day. Since it's only a few frames that need to change, I simply chopped those couple frames out of the Photoshop timeline and drew in the 3 frames basically to make the wink. And here you can see that inconsistent style I was talking about a moment ago. I've got half-tone dots under the chin, I've got fine lines under the lip and the left cheek, and near the hair I've got, kind of a scribbly line style that's kind of merging back towards the comic book style. Overall, it gives the impression of a collage, and collages are always artsy and cool, so maybe try a little bit more of that later on. Now, in the process of all that, we had kind of drifted away from our original idea. Yeah, and of course, as the features become more and more stylized, all of the characters tend to look the same in manga. So I popped out another image just as an experiment. It kind of worked. I mean, it looks a little less cat and a little bit more alien. I used a really light kind of scribbly line style. That looks pretty decent. Alright, our third image is going to be a grayscale. Well, it's going to start out as a grayscale. We'll get more into that later. We're going to try this faux engraved style. And then later on we'll discuss how to convert that to a bitmap and why, and how the pixel dimensions are set up to allow us to do that. So starting out, I built this grayscale sketch, and now we're putting these sort of faux engraved lines over top that. We have the pin pressure on, so basically just letting up the pressure when I want to make a lighter line. This is Chef Nicole, again from the YouTube channel Mythical Kitchen. She is probably the most responsible, stable, and traditionally minded, so that's why we're using this faux engrave effect. So the scale and the resolution that this ends up being printed at is going to depend highly on the substrate and the dot gain that comes along with that substrate. If it gets printed on newsprint, for example, the scale will have to stay relatively large, and while the interference from the halftone screen will create some moire effect with the faux engraving lines, there should be enough of that underlying grayscale shading to still get across the basic idea of the image. The printing company's raster image processor will break this grayscale image down into a halftone screen. The smallest mark that the processor can make can be thought of as its pixel. The halftone dots, which are referred to in terms of LPI, not DPI, the halftone dots are made up of a number of the processor pixels. The more pixels per dot, the more gradations, the more different values of gray the processor is capable of producing. Banding occurs when there's pixel starvation. Dot gain refers to the tendency of ink to spread into the fibers of the substrate. The main factors are the porosity of the substrate and the viscosity of the ink. So a porous substrate like newsprint will have a high dot gain, and fine line details will tend to plug in. If, on the other hand, the image is going on, say, a gloss-coated paper inside a magazine, now the dot gain is much lower, and the image can be scaled right down. Probably an image like this could print at 2x2 or 1.5 by 1.5 at a DPI of 1200. That's a case where the image is written directly by the processor's laser. It's not broken down into a halftone pattern first. So I could have redrawn the whole thing, but in this case I just used the Photoshop's threshold filter to convert the grayscale layer into a bitmap. So now there are no shades of gray, it's only black and white. And in that case we can use the processor's laser to write the image at about 1200 dpi. And you'll want to use the TIFF tagged image file format for an image like this. I think you could actually get a little smaller than this on gloss paper and still have a crisp image.